Okay, so what we'll be looking at right now is how to enter an SGO into the Genesis employee portal system. The first thing you'll need to do is make sure that you navigate into the employee portal system by going to portal.sidmonson.com. Once you get there, you can enter your username, which is your district username, and your password. Again, same as your district login. Once you're logged in, since we're going to be working with SGOs, you're going to navigate over to the SGO tab. Just like the Student Information System browser, everything is tab navigation. So if we click on SGO, it'll bring you to the SGO portion. Just for good measure, make sure that you're working within this school year. For purposes of this video, we're looking at the 2016-17 school year. You're also going to check to make sure you're working on the correct SGO form. So if we don't have any SGOs, the first one by default is going to be SGO1. Then you'll notice there's a spot here for SGO2. Also, don't be alarmed if you look here and you can see that there is room for multiple SGOs beyond just your 1 or your 2. But for today, we're going to just be concerned with doing our SGO1, and then obviously if you're a 2 SGO person, you'll be able to navigate over to your second SGO. So we are in 2016-17, we are on SGO1, and now we're going to navigate down to create our first SGO. So we click on start a new SGO1 form. And we hit OK to confirm that we want to start. So for purposes of this tutorial or this sample video, we're going to be working with one of the state exemplars. I actually have a copy in my other window of the SGO exemplar from physical education, grade 6, kind of right in the middle of our district. The data is good, clean, and easy to copy over. So kind of no matter where you are, K through 12, this is kind of right in the middle, and it has all of the elements that we'll need to produce a good quality SGO. So I'll be flipping back and forth a little bit between the two windows, but everything you're going to need is right here on this employee portal window. Also, something that you want to keep in mind, the back end, kind of the final result of all of this, is the state SGO form, which everyone in the district should be familiar with. So I'll kind of fast forward and show you what that looks like, and you'll see this is probably a familiar looking form to you because you've seen this before. The information is all laid out the same, just as it was in years past on the state form. Genesis just formats it for us. So I'm going to hop back, and we actually need to fill out some data first before it will populate like the state form. So I'm going to go ahead and begin to fill out my sample data here. And again, I'm using this SGO example from physical education in grade 6. So clearly for grade here, I'm going to put in my grade. I'm going to put in my subject. And I'll check the number of students here. For this particular instructor, it is 95 students. And we have our interval of instruction, which is basically the time of year where this SGO is going to apply. For this particular educator, it was September through February. So at this point now, we move down into section 2, which is the standards, rationale, and assessment method. This may come from your state standards, the NJSLS, the core content in your particular subject area. For here, I'm going to just go ahead and copy and paste the standards or the rationale from this particular teacher, including the assessment and the applicable standards. It looks like this teacher has quite a bit. So we've got 3 different sets of standards, we've got our assessment piece, and we've got our rationale. So I am just copying this, and if this is an SGO you've done similar in the past, as long as nothing is changing from the rationale and assessment or even the standards, you may even want to use those as a reference document. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in all of that stuff I just did. Now, just like anything else in the student information side of Genesis and on the employee portal side, nothing is saved until you hit save. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. It even shows up as red until you hit save. So go ahead and make sure you hit save. You notice now everything is turned to black. That lets me know it is now an official part of my document, and I don't have to worry about if I exit out and go back in. Once I've saved that portion, it is saved. Okay, so I've done part 1, part 2, and now I'm going to go to part 3. And this is the part where potentially there could be some areas for confusion, so hopefully going through this in video form, you'll be able to go back and kind of watch it again if you missed something. So we're going to define our preparedness groups, which again, if you've done this before, it is just like when we did it using the old state form. This particular sample is going to have 3 different preparedness groups. We have a low group, a middle group, and a high group. The preparedness group is defined by 3 pieces of information, and here the physical education teacher defines what these pieces of information are. At this point, we're going to define them in the employee portal. So I skip back into the employee portal, and you'll do it one preparedness group at a time. So I'm going to click on Add Preparedness Group, and I believe they've called this one, this is my low group. And it's asking me for what the cut scores are, what the pieces of information on each, or what the scores are for each piece of information. So I apologize, this will take just a couple seconds, but essentially what I'm doing is I am copying and pasting right from the sample. So this would be information that you would define for yourself and would probably already have defined before you go to put this into Genesis Employee Portal. So I've again said now this is my first preparedness group is low. On the first piece of information, I am looking that this student is in the preparedness group because they've gotten a lower than 50 on information group 1. Information group 2, they got 5 to 6 points. And information group 3 is less than 50. If you find yourself confused and you're saying, well, what is information 1, 2, and 3? Again, I go back to the sample from the state, and information number 1 was this diagnostic written pre-assessment. Information piece number 2 was the markers of future success. And information item number 3 was the diagnostic performance assessment. So you can go ahead and define what your multiple measures are for student preparedness. So I'm going to hit Add, and I've got preparedness group 1 now defined. I hit Add again, and this is my group number 2, or as our sample has called, this is my middle group. So I'm going to go ahead and type this in as my middle group, and I'm going to carry the scores over from their rubric. And now I hit Add, and now I've got 2 preparedness groups established, my low group and my middle group. Now we're going to add this 3rd performance group here, and this is our high group. And I'm going to put in the rubric scores for this. I know it's a lot of clicking and moving back and forth right now, but again, these would be scores that you would have already established. So all I'm doing is copying and pasting from the state exemplar so that I have something that is ready to go, kind of canned in out of the box. So I've done part 1, which was my basic demographic and background. I did part 2, which was my standards, rationale, and assessment. And now I've completed part 3, which is the starting points and preparedness groupings. Now it's time to actually enter what the student growth objective is. So again, you would have written this. I'll go back to the sample, and the student growth objective is that 85% of students in each group will reach their specific target score. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. There we go. Okay, and let me flip back because now we are going to enter the number of students in each group. So I have to tell Genesis Employee Portal how many students are in preparedness groups 1, preparedness group 2, preparedness group 3. So now we have number of students in each group. I see I have 45, 29, and 21. So I'll go and hit in here 45, 29 in middle, and 21 in high. So I've entered the number of students in each group. Now I need to define the target score for the SGO for that particular preparedness group. They have suggested that the student will get a 70 or higher as their target score if they are in the low group. So I will just come in here and put 70. Here's a little caveat about Genesis Employee Portal. There's no equal or greater than, as the teacher in the sample has indicated. You want to just put the score 70, and Genesis will know that you mean 70 or higher. It will sort of default to say, well, if you got a 75, you've met it, so it just knows anything that is 70 or higher would have met that target score. So for my middle group, the target score is 80, and then for my high group, the target score is 90. So I'm going to go and fill those numbers in. You'll notice again, I'm red here with all of my data entry. So even if I haven't finished this scoring plan down here at the bottom, I can go ahead and hit save, and I've locked in the information that I've put. I've saved now my student growth objective and this preparedness group block. And if that is a value to you, so you don't accidentally click out of it or you lose track, I always feel better when I save my work. We've got one last step here, and that is we need to establish our scoring plan. So essentially, I need to tell Genesis, this is what happens when X number of students hit the target. Now, one of the really great and powerful things about the employee portal is that it will do all of your scoring for you as long as you set it up correctly at this stage. It's a little bit confusing, and before we go and put our numbers in, I just want to kind of put up a little bit of a caution flag here that if you don't do it correctly, your SGO is not out the window, but you may forego the option to have Genesis auto score it for you. So we're going to put in what the student target score was. So again, on the low side, it was 70, middle 80, high 90. I'll go and enter those in, 70, 80, and 90. So now I have to decide what the percentages are, or hopefully by the time you get to the Genesis portion, you've already decided what your percentages will be here. And this teacher said 95% and above gets this student a 4. Now here's the other real big caution here. Employee portal hates ranges. You can't put in what would seem logical in your brain, the 95 to 100. This value, it's going to give me an error message. It's not going to be able to calculate and compute. What you need to tell Genesis Employee Portal, and this is like big red flag, this is real meat here that will keep you from pulling your hair out later. You want to tell Genesis Employee Portal the low range of each teacher SGO score percentage. So if I want 95 to 100, I'm going to tell Genesis 95. Genesis will then infer, if the kid gets a 96, they're still within this group because 100 is the ceiling. If you're still with me, we'll go on to what would be a 3. And here in the sample, you'll notice it's written 85 to 94%. Again, we're only telling Genesis what the low range is. So we are going to put in here 85. Genesis now figures out what the range is based on these two numbers. It knows that if 86% of the students achieve a 70 or better in this preparedness group, again 86%, it would be a 3, 87, 88, all the way up to 95. If 95% hit this, then it jumps up to a 4. And the range has been established by the difference between this number and this number. Again, it's a little convoluted. All you really need to know is you want to put in the low range number for each score. So I go back to my sample, and the sample teacher has said 75 to 84% would be a 2 on this SGO. So what do I need to put in here? I need to tell it 75, since that's the low range of the 2 score. Now, here's where you might say, well, this is pretty easy. If I want to do below 75%, I simply enter that as the low range of that, which would be 0. Meaning that if 0% all the way up to 74.9% of the students hit this target, if it's anywhere from 0 to 74.9, the teacher score would be a 1. If it's 75 to 85, we would be at a 2. If it's 85 to 95, we would be at a 3. And if it's 95 or above, they would be at a 4 for that particular preparedness group. I'm going to go ahead and save this so it locks my numbers in. Now, one thing I did notice in the sample is that the scoring range was the same for all 3 preparedness groups. The only difference here is what the student target score is for each group. So I'm going to go ahead and just replicate the same scoring plan and copy all of these values in. So if your SGO is one that has below X amount, you'll always know it's easy for the insufficient or 1 scoring range. You're almost always going to hit a 0 there because that will give you all of the amounts below whatever your partial score was. Now I hit save. I have established my preparedness group target score, and all of the scoring categories to achieve each of my numbers. At this point, I'll just hit save again, and I have now completed my first SGO. I'm ready to go ahead and do that again now for SGO number 2.